A very good morning to everybody. It's nice to see so many of you here already at this early hour of the day. My name is Maria Kelo. I am the director of ENQA, which is the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, a partner in this EUniQ project and a co-organizer of today's webinar. And I will be the moderator for this coming 3 hours or so. There are already now about 200 people connected, and we are also streaming this event on YouTube to allow for as many people as possible to take part in some form or another. There's been a lot of interest in this webinar. It really shows the importance and relevance of this topic, and also kind of the great expectations I think there are on finding a workable and appropriate quality assurance approach for the European University Alliances. So the title of this event is Outcomes of the EUniQ Pilots and Implications for the Framework for Quality Assurance of European Universities. So in this project, 4 pilot evaluations using a specific approach created purposefully for these alliances and to capture the specificity of such a collaboration arrangement were run. And now we are collecting the lessons learned in order to revise the framework and also discuss where do we want to go with this in the longer term. So this is what we'll be discussing this morning. Before we start the actual program, a couple of technical notes I would like to make. I see from the chat many are saying hello and good morning. So you have found it. If you haven't found it, if you go at the bottom of the screen, you find an icon which says chat. If you click on that, the chat field opens to the right and you will be able to write your messages there. Please use that liberally for commenting, for sending greetings, for sharing your experiences, etc. But please note that we also have a Q&A specific questions sections, and it will be much easier for us to capture your questions if you write them in the Q&A section. So that's right in the bottom right next to the chat. So if you click on that, you can write your questions there. You can also see what questions other people have been asking, and you can give your thumbs up to a question so it moves up in the rank, and we will be picking that up to be addressed by the speakers as we go. So you do use that as well. Webinar participants will not be able to use their videos. There are far too many of us to be able to do that. And your mics are also off, but then you will be able to indeed write in the chat and in the Q&A. And when you write a message, if you want that to go to everybody, please make sure you select in the to field all panelists and attendees. It might be on all panelists as a default, and then that only goes to those who are the speakers. So if you want everybody to see your comments, please use all panelists and attendees. So that's all for the technical elements. We have to go through that, although we've been doing this for about a year now, and it's always good to have a reminder as we might be using different tools. We will now start the officially start the event itself, and I would like to start that by giving the floor to Magali Sönen from the Flemish Ministry of Education and Training, who was really the initiator of this project and is the mother of this project. So Magali, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. Dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the mother, the Flemish Ministry of Education and Training, and the EUniQ Consortium, I would like to welcome you to this webinar, in which we will present to you, as Maria already said, the outcomes of the EUniQ pilots and the implications for the framework for quality assurance of European universities. But let me start by focusing on why we took this initiative in the first place. For Flanders, quality assurance has always been a very important aspect within the Bologna process, and of course also within our national higher education policy. Therefore, when the Ministers of Education defined the 3 key commitments of the European higher education area during their ministerial conference in Paris in 2018, Flanders took up the responsibility to become a co-chair of the Bologna Peer Support Group on Quality Assurance. We have brought together about 45 representatives of ministries, QA agencies, and stakeholder organizations to mainly learn from each other with the goal of a better implementation of the Bologna tools within the European higher education area. And at the same time, to facilitate the work of this peer group, we also successfully applied for 3 European projects on quality assurance at that time. The first one was meant for the organization of 3 big peer group meetings, where many of you might have taken part in, and where countries could meet and learn from each other. A second one gives the opportunity for staff members of ministries, QA agencies, and stakeholder organizations to apply for a mobility to another ministry, another country, another agency within the European higher education area. And finally, we also applied together with the Dutch-Flemish accreditation agency, NVAO, and of course all our project partners for a third project, EUniQ, the one that gathered us here today for this webinar. While the other 2 projects are mainly focusing on peer learning, the EUniQ project is focusing on innovation. Within EUniQ, we are developing a European framework for the comprehensive quality assurance of the new European universities. And this project has been running since May 2019, and it will finish in November of this year. In the EUniQ project, quality assurance agencies and ministries of 13 countries, 3 European stakeholder organizations, and of course, European universities themselves, they cooperate to develop and trial an assessment approach for QA agencies, which allows to assess and enhance quality at European universities. The objectives of the project are firstly to develop a needs analysis and to really demonstrate the feasibility of organizing assessments of European university. Secondly, to develop an assessment methodology that takes into account also in supra-institutional policies. Thirdly, it undertakes 4 pilot assessments of European universities, and as a result, it also produces an assessment approach for quality assurance agencies. The benefits of the projects are multiple. It helps alliances to both define and also self-assess their quality, but it also opens up a dialogue between QA agencies and the European universities, enabling the assessment of the universities in an appropriate way. It also assists stakeholders' perspectives based on facts, and finally, it facilitates QA peer support across the European higher education area. Now, where are we now? We started off the project with a workshop with the first 17 selected alliances and the project partners in Rome already in October 2019. After this, the quality assurance framework for the pilot visits was drafted, and experts were selected in early spring 2020. A workshop for panel experts and agency coordinators followed. And at the same time, also a paper on the analysis of the proposed methodology was drafted by the ministries involved in the project. The pilot evaluations of 4 European university alliances took place in the second part of 2020. And the criteria within the used framework were based on an appreciative approach and organized around the following questions. First thing that was asked was, what is European university's vision on the quality of its education and, where possible, research, innovation, and service to society? Secondly, we wanted to know, how will the European university realize its own vision? And how does European university monitor to what extent its vision is actually realized? Furthermore, it was asked on how the European university was working on or is working on improvement. And finally, how is the quality of the European university's provision assured in an internationally accepted manner? So the focus of the pilot evaluations of the 4 alliances was on the effectiveness of their internal quality assurance and quality enhancement mechanisms, taking into account the developmental process towards achieving the evaluation criteria, rather than on the assessment of compliance to the criteria. Now, the ultimate aim of the European framework for comprehensive QA of European universities is that the alliances can be externally evaluated with only one European framework and one corresponding suitable QA procedure, instead of being subject to multiple national and European frameworks and procedures, that may be conflicting, burdensome, or less suitable for the European universities. As we are currently only at the start of the development process of European universities, the internal and external QA of the alliances is still a learning process. And now, today, we are ready to share the results of these pilot evaluations with you. So, to conclude, European universities are very innovative, and so should be the quality assurance of these universities. Each network is looking for its own identity and way of working together. It's a new way of cooperation for everyone. And for the quality assurance of European universities, we also need to work together, over borders and with many different stakeholders. Universities themselves, of course, but also the ministries, the QA agencies, the stakeholder organizations. And we see that European universities are becoming more and more important and visible. And therefore, the QA framework will be increasingly important as well. As the high number of participants for today's webinar shows, there is a high interest in the quality assurance of European universities. And there are also very high expectations. So we are very much looking forward to the upcoming sessions and the first results. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Magali. Thank you for the introduction and setting the scene for us for today's event. We will proceed immediately with the second presentation of today. Regrettably, there has been a small change in the program as Vanessa Devier-Sainton from the European Commission Higher Education Policy Unit cannot be at the end with us this morning. However, we are very lucky because we have her colleague, Clara Engelsbereni, instead. And she will now be giving us an update on the European Universities Initiative. So Clara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much, Magali, and thank you for the invitation. We are really pleased to be with you today, and we are especially welcoming this pioneering project, which started actually even before the first European Universities Alliances were selected. And it shows how important quality is regarding these alliances. Just a second. Yes, I'm trying to go further with the slides, but somehow I don't get the possibility to go further. So Anthony, if you could, Anthony, if you could go to the next slide for me, please. Thank you very much. Yes, so I would like to focus on a few points in today's presentation, a little bit about the development of the European universities, then also a little bit of the broader policy aspect, and also some reflections on what we think this framework can bring for the European universities and how it could further develop. On the next slide, you see the current state of play with European universities. We have from the two pilot rounds, we had already 41 alliances working on their long-term vision for European universities, and they include already close to 300 higher education institutions from Europe. They get support from the Erasmus Plus program, but also from the Horizon 2020 program, and they include outside of the 27 member states of the EU, also some further countries which are part of the Erasmus Plus program. The first alliances are already busy with their first midterm reporting, and we are curious to see their progress, although we are also very much aware that the alliances are working very, very hard on their objectives, and that they are also eager to share it with with each other and also with other higher education institutions which are not part of European Universities Alliances. On the next slide, you can see the further steps regarding policy making. There will be soon in May Council conclusions prepared by the Portuguese presidency on European universities. These are developed together with all member states in the Education Committee of the EU at the moment, and they will be adopted by ministers in their meeting in May. Together, at the same time, we are also starting discussions with the member states and stakeholders, including representatives of the alliances, about the future development of this initiative. Because after the first 2 pilot years, it is time to think and decide about the way forward. And this process will be done really together with all the different stakeholders. It's very little to say because the first meetings will start in the coming weeks, and they will continue for a few months, and then they will lead to further developments in the European Universities Alliances. And unfortunately, I cannot say anything wider about that, but I think after these discussions, it will be we will be able to say that the initiative is developing as the stakeholders would like to see it as well. And I would like to continue with the wider policy framework. On the next slide, you can see a number of initiatives which are ongoing in the European context. The European Commission published a communication on the European education area in September, and this communication lists a number of items we would like to focus our work in the coming years. And the very first one, and probably the most comprehensive one, is the development of a collective vision on the transformation agenda for higher education and universities. And this would be wider than only the European Universities Alliances and would refer to all higher education institutions in Europe. And we are also working on a council recommendation to micro-credentials, a European approach to micro-credentials, and also on the idea of a possible European degree, about which I will talk a little bit more later. And we are also going to look into possible needs of further development of quality assurance in Europe, because the last Council recommendation the EU issued about quality assurance dates back about 15 years already. So it's perhaps time to decide together what should be the main topics for the development of quality assurance in Europe. But this we will do only in a few next year. We will start on this really next year, because we would like to take on board also messages coming from the European Universities Alliances to see what their needs would be in this area, because we know that for their cooperation, quality assurance is really one of the key elements. And in parallel, there will be also another pioneering topic about the exploring of the feasibility of a European university statute. Then on the next slide, you can see what we understand under the European degree. I mean, not really understanding, it's not a definition, but it is more a vision for a European degree. And we also know that European Universities Alliances are keen discussing this topic. Also for students, this would be something they would welcome. And also here there is no set definition yet. This will also be done together, creating it together, and to see whether this is feasible at all. But the vision relates very closely to the vision of the European universities. Then on the next slide, you can see the further steps in this topic. There will be a study done by a contractor which has just been selected. So it will the contractor will start working in the coming weeks, and it will have a lot of different events and consultations with wider stakeholders. So I think you will hear much more about this in the coming 1.5 years on this project. Then further on the next slide, we listed the different enablers for such a European degree, and we see the EUniQ project also as one of the possible enablers, and we are really looking forward to get more input from the project in the coming months, which could then feed into the considerations about a possible European degree. And finally, I would like to say a few words about, sorry, it's not finally, there are two small sections about the European higher education transformation agenda, which I mentioned at the beginning. This is an initiative which will bring together the different roles of higher education institutions, the different missions, starting from education and training to research, innovation, and will also the community engagement, and it will also have a digital dimension, because digitalization has a very big impact on our life and on the institution's life. And it also links to the skills agenda of the EU. So it will be an initiative, a document which will focus on implementation of the different visions set out in the different communications. And this is also a project, or sorry, not a project, but this is also something we are developing together with the stakeholders. And on the next slide, you can see how these consultations will happen. On the transformation agenda, there will be also an open public consultation starting in the spring, and there will be discussions with an expert group of stakeholders, also of the European Universities Alliances, and also from national authorities. And there will be targeted consultation activities with the different groups of stakeholders. And this consultation will also take on board stakeholders from the research and innovation field. And now I come to the final section of my presentation, where I would like to say a few words how we would like to see input from the EUniQ project, and how we think it could help the development of the previously mentioned processes. We think that the framework should define really its purpose. What will it bring to higher education institutions, the members of the different alliances, but what will it bring to national authorities, to quality assurance agencies, and to students? I think this is very important to clarify, and as this is a pilot project, until now, there were already quite some discussions on the purpose, but I guess in the final phase of the project, they will get a more concrete shape. We would like to see also how it links to the European approach for the quality assurance of joint programs. Can it support the implementation of the European approach, or could it be something which might, on the longer term, replace the European approach? So there are still a lot of open questions, and I think that makes this discussion so exciting, because a lot is open and a lot can happen. It would be also useful to see how this framework could facilitate the development of a European degree. And it is also very, very important to add that we would not like to see any further additional complexity in the quality assurance procedures, because the alliances have to follow already many procedures, starting from the institutional approaches, the national approaches, and also for their own alliances. We already heard in the discussions of the project of the EUniQ project that this is the intention, and we just to underline that we are also very much in favor of having a lean process. Mm-hmm. We think that the process, how it is working now with 2 ECHA registered quality assurance agencies evaluating alliances, has a clear added value, and it is something perhaps which could be maintained also for the final framework. It is also interesting. It would be also interesting to see whether the procedures are feasible, and whether the current focus on enhancement should or could be could have some further accountability measures in order to make the process and the framework even more solid, so that it can accepted by national authorities. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the presentation of the pilot evaluations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clara. I think very many interesting points, and you answered to one of the questions in the Q&A, which is how does the European Commission see EUniQ and the future of external quality assurance of the European universities? And I think your last section was spot on that. And I personally find interesting this element of, yes, enhancement, but if that is to somehow in the future replace other national quality assurance mechanisms, the accountability element would need to be taken care of as well. We are almost at the end of our time, and we had not foreseen really now time for questions, because then we have the discussion. But I would like to bring up 2 little questions for you, Clara. You can answer very briefly if you'd like. The first is, will there be a follow-up of EUniQ? Does the Commission see maybe there is a scope for something like that, and what would that perhaps entail, if so? And the second question is a bit more conceptual, and might take us a bit off the track, but I'll ask it nevertheless because I think it is an interesting one. Shouldn't the vision for the European degree apply to all qualifications that come out of a joint program in the European higher education area? So those 2 questions to you, Clara.
Thank you very much. As regards the follow-up on EUniQ, it is also very much up to the project partners and the applicants to show that there could be a way forward, and there could be further areas to be explored. We are really open to that. There will be a similar call later this year, under which EUniQ was presented. This was the key action 3, call for policy development, and in particular on the implementation of the European higher education area reforms. So there will be a space for continuation, but of course it will be in competition to other projects. So it's difficult to say, but the possibility is there. And as regards the European degree, the options are really, really wide. This is why we asked an external consultant to help us with exploring the different options. Maria, you and Tia Lukula from the European University Association, you presented some ideas some months ago about the European degree, and this was one of the options. Another option was just a simple label, which is probably the least favored if you are ambitious, but it's very important to see in the European degree this transformational effect of cooperation between different universities from all over Europe, and different universities and higher education institutions in general. So really, there we need your input and your ideas very much.
Thank you, Clara. And a very technical, super easy question for you, I suppose. Will there be a third call for European university initiatives, and if so, when?
It's not that easy. It sounds very easy, but there is no decision on this. We will also take into account the feedback from the different stakeholders meetings I mentioned, which are coming up in the next weeks and months, to reflect on it. But there is a possibility, an option to go forward, but this should not happen without the reflection on the first 2 years pilots.
Thank you very much, Clara, and thank you for the participants for having attentively listened and asked pertinent questions as well. So now we get to the pilots. This is really the core of today's discussions. We have a longish session where we hear for a short presentation of maximum 10 minutes of each of the EUniQ pilots from the perspective of the alliances themselves first, and then we will proceed to a discussion where those who were leading the review panels, the panel chairs of each of the pilot procedures, will also feed into the discussion from their perspective. So we try to tease out what are really the benefits of such an approach, what are the main lessons learned, how can we make it kind of a clear purpose for this process, clear outcomes, how can it be interesting for the alliances to take part in such exercises. So all these kind of issues will be covered in the next hour and a quarter. So we'll start with the brief presentations from the alliances with Thomas Deselan from Utopia. Please go ahead, Thomas.
Hi, thank you for the floor. I would ask for the PowerPoint, yes. Okay, hopefully I'll be able to navigate it. Otherwise, I'll ask for shifts in slides. So good morning, everyone, actually. It's a pleasure to present the Utopia's experience with the EUniQ project and the pilot we've experienced, and obviously there's not a lot of time devoted to this presentation, but hopefully we can also open up different ideas, and then also we can further share our reflection during the discussion phase. So basically, I'll just give you a brief overview of the main outcomes when it comes to Utopia, and also briefly present what the Utopia is all about, for you to have an idea about what we were doing and how the EUniQ exercise actually enriched us. So I'll ask for the next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So about the organization of the Utopia quality assurance processes, Basically, it's a more or less conventional approach. We have a quality board which oversees the quality assurance processes, and it's constituted by the Utopia Alliance members, so basically 6 universities. And we also were striving to present various perspectives in the quality assurance, the main quality assurance body, in order to have various ideas present already at the body itself. What we wanted to create with the quality board is actually to assure the quality and delivery of the project itself initially, but eventually this will become a quality body for the alliance. And obviously there's going to be a transition, and this is actually a challenging task to navigate the operations that were basically envisaged in the project proposal, while at the same time building the alliance, and also in correspondence creating a body that would correspond to all these different processes within the alliance. It operates according to its terms of reference and quality plan, and it regularly reports to the Utopia Executive Board. In essence, it actually oversees quality across the alliance already, and keeps a systematic check on the progress and quality of the outputs, particularly of the Utopia 2050 activities. And it has a special coordinator, which actually plays plays a role of a liaison between the quality assurance body, the main body, and its and the representatives of the member universities and the executive board. So basically, the main communication channel between the quality board and the executive board is the quality board coordinator, and then in our case it's he. I'm currently the quality board coordinator, and I present the I report to the executive board about the quality assurance processes, as well as proposed decisions arising from the QA processes. So basically what we wanted to create immediately is mainstream the quality processes into the main governance processes that are being performed, and also into ingrain the quality assurance into the main managerial decisions. I'll ask for the next slide, please. So the main characteristics of the Utopia QA are the following. So basically, what we clearly envisaged is the fact that we need to create some sort of common ground from 6 quite different, but still very coherent national regimes. And obviously our main convergence is around the ESGs. So basically the ESGs are the common denominator, while at the same time we nurture different national approaches. So we don't copy paste ideas. Basically on this basis, this allowed us to actually already at the start of the process, or even before that, we kind of triggered the processes of, let's say, blue sky thinking of what the educational offering of the future European University Utopia could be. So basically what we wanted to create is something out of the box, and obviously not being too frustrated about the differences of the national regimes gave us the incentives to actually do that. At the same time, we do, well, obviously nurture our quality assurance processes within our national regimes and within the regimes that are currently in place. And obviously, this is what we realized, a good starting point to actually create this blue sky thinking that we're currently doing. And our vision is actually to transform these nationally embedded ideas and also campuses in this case to European learning communities. So this is our innovative educational offering, learning communities that could then provide different modalities of educational offering that will be in place. So basically not limiting ourselves to, I don't know, joint degrees and so on, but actually providing a full scale of different educational offerings at our disposal. And what we also wanted to create is we wanted to mainstream QA processes to the highest echelons of the governance processes and structures in order to avoid this, let's say, ghettoization of QA processes or duplication of different processes where the QA sometimes play a very strange role, or even is perceived as something which is necessary, but nobody wants to do it. So basically what we wanted to do is ingrain these processes in the highest managerial processes and structures. Next slide, please.
Thomas, 2 minutes, yeah?
Yeah. I'm approaching the end. So basically, what the EUniQ exercise provided for us is a very rewarding exercise experience that actually steered additionally our internal discussions and ideas towards the QA and then assuring quality. And also to actually have a very clear idea about what the QA, what the quality assurance processes of the project mean, and what of the alliance mean, and how we're gonna assure the educational offerings that we're gonna offer. Then at the same time, it created a huge challenge because we were basically preparing our documentation in the month 3 of the project. So basically at the start. So basically we were doing quite a lot of creative thinking as well. And obviously what we lacked, but clearly there was a clear idea that this is needed in the further processes, is more interaction with the panel to actually have a more coherent ideas about what we're evaluating or talking about. And please, my last slide. So on the basis of our really rewarding experience, we kind of proposed several recommendations. First of all, we see early site visits as a very helpful tool. However, they should include just a limited scope of the proposed evaluation criteria, and it should be steered, as it was said yesterday by one of the speakers, towards a formative dialogue. This could actually help a lot. And I don't think this is a consultancy. It's actually a dialogue between different authorities and the educational institutions, and it would be a great experience, I can tell you, because even the amount of experience or interaction we've had, it was rewarding. Then pre-site visit meetings to actually calibrate the targets of evaluation would help a lot. The third one, we feel that we should be, and I'm very happy to hear that already today, we should be among the key players constituting a shared vision about what we're going to create in the future. So basically, we really would like to see that, and we're eager to participate in those processes. And the final one, we feel that the future QA of the external QA system of the European University should be obviously enhancement-led, should allow for radical, out-of-the-box ideas about the educational offering European educational institutions can offer, and should cover the totality of the alliance's activities related to the European University, European universities, because we're doing way more than just offer something innovative. So basically, we spurred different spillovers, and we feel that this should be something that's actually acknowledged, and also evaluated with appreciation, because basically we're building way more than we initially anticipated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You also already unknowingly perhaps answered one of the questions in the Q&A, which was indeed on that. Shouldn't the QA of the European universities really look at everything done by the university, because it really is a comprehensive project? So you already touched upon that. We are collecting the questions. We will not forget about those, but we will leave that to the discussion. So we proceed now to the next presentation. Emily Palmer from EUnaEuropa, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, as introduced, my name is Emily Palmer. I'm the Secretary General of EUnaEuropa, and I'm very happy to be able to present our experience with the EUniQ framework this morning. Right, so just to explain the background of EUnaEuropa, EUnaEuropa is made up of 8 leading research-intensive universities from all 4 corners of Europe. As you can see on the screen now, we comprise among us the oldest of Europe's universities, Bologna being Europe's oldest university, educating Europe for almost 1,000 years. But we're also very large universities, so we have more than 400,000 students and more than 1 million digital learners. We think it's very important to share with you a little bit how we're organized and yeah, how we work together, because it's from that quality assurance obviously derives. So you can see here One Europe. That's actually the name of our pilot project that's funded by the Erasmus funding. But you can see on the left-hand side of the screen that we have also established a not-for-profit association, which is funded by the members and has the goal of really looking into the sustainability of the Alliance in the long term. So building the strategies and hopefully attracting the external finances so that the Alliance can continue beyond the pilot projects. I say pilot projects because we obviously have the Erasmus project One Europe that's been running now for almost 18 months, but we have a sister project in our case called EUnaResin, which is the research and innovation dimension topped up by Horizon 2020. I think it's important to show the link between the two, but also the different work packages that you can see here of our pilot. And our quality assurance framework was first established with really the oversight over the whole project and all the work packages in its entirety. I think what's really important to say as well at this moment is that the importance of the community. So you can build as many structures as you like, kind of top down, but without having the community building and flourishing within, the European university cannot be a success in the long run. And so we spend a huge amount of effort on trying to build these communities, but also it's very much closely linked to quality assurance as well, because engagement of them from the very beginning and as the Alliance is developing is absolutely key. So what we have are academic communities. We've created self-steering committees of academics in 5 focus areas, and they're working across educational programs, but also on research and innovation projects. What's really important to mention here as well is that we also have communities of practice. So this is really our professionals. We bring them together in what's called flexible support services. So this is ultimately clusters of excellence that are working on different topics required for our ambitious projects, whether that's in teaching and learning, quality assurance, student administration, whether it's in open science, whether it's in doctoral training. We bring together clusters, and these clusters bring experts from the 8 universities, but then we take what's called a lead university approach, or project team approach, if you like, to try to be very efficient. Because if you bring together hundreds of academics and 100 professionals to work on everything at the same time, it's not very effective. So we take this lead university approach where actions take place at the place where it really makes sense, and there's trust between the partners. So a university is overseeing a project led by normally an academic, and they bring the experts from the different clusters from their university to support the development of that project. And of course, those academics are linked to the academics from the 8 universities, but the clusters are also linking the 8 universities. We have a video that we've just developed on this project teams approach, which we've just posted on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So I encourage you to look at it to see how better we're organized, because we don't really have time to go into it now, but it's really central to our quality assurance approach and also to the sustainability of the Alliance, because these communities of practices and these academic committees go way beyond the boundaries of the 3-year projects that we have funded by the EU. So to get very practical now and into internal quality assurance, yeah, we are developing as part of our One Europe project what we call joint innovative formats. These are in education and in mobility, and you can see them across the focus areas, and yeah, we're working on many, more than 20. Some are joint degrees at bachelor and PhD level, which we hope very much to be feeding in to the European degree discussion that was mentioned by Clara earlier on. But we're also working on micro-credentials, lifelong learning certificate, and other models of educational formats as well. Now, I think what's really important to say, so just to give an example of how our internal quality assurance is building in relation to our joint innovative formats, we've been working extremely hard on a joint bachelor in European studies. I'm personally really excited by it because I'm a graduate of European studies. We've submitted this to the Flemish authorities just a few weeks ago and are about to engage on the European approach. And to do so, we've really had to build an internal quality assurance framework which will be scaled up for all the other joint courses and programs that we're working on. So I think what's absolutely central is to say is that we need to trust the 8 universities' internal quality assurance systems. So we're trying to understand how the 8 universities work, and then there's the possibility to build on those 8 structures. So we're not trying to create at the level of EUNEUropa where it's not necessary, but really to build trust between the partners. And then of course there is a need for a joint but lean framework to ensure effective decision making and communication on the partners. So just to give an example in relation to the joint bachelor for European studies, they're looking at our cluster experts are looking at how to reach consensus on general principles for European for quality assurance, and then looking at this joint structure to monitor the quality of the entire program. So this is being done by an academic steering committee established just for this program, and they have support from an administrative committee that will be made up of quality assurance experts. But there needs to be underneath that really very much transparency and trust between the 8 partners and what's going on there and how they are working on quality assurance. So that's looking really at the internal quality assurance in relation to our joint courses and programs, and that's carried out by the quality assurance cluster. But we also have quality assurance looking at the project as a whole. So there we have, of course, a very strong project coordination led by KU Leuven, and they are responsible for the oversight of a quality management plan. We have a project steering committee that's meeting monthly, looking at all the different work packages, outputs, but also the outputs of the self-steering committees, and the students are also represented there. And the executive committee is the highest level decision making for the project. But we also have a quality assurance board, which is looking at the overall outputs of our project and providing advice.
Emily,
Yes.
sorry, last minute.
Sure, of course. So this is made up of the experts in quality assurance of our universities, but we also have external stakeholders to make sure that we're connected to the higher education agenda as a whole at the level of Europe. I'll try to run very, very quickly now to the EUniQ framework. So what we will be doing, we were really grateful to get some feedback, is to try to enrich our governance structure of Una Europa, coming from the One Europe project and bringing it to the whole of Una Europa. So we're now, for instance, looking to extend the quality assurance board, not just to look at the educational part, but also the research part and the global dimension part and sustainability part that we're looking at. Student involvement is also really important, so we're looking to see how we can engage on that further as well. And then the final slide, just to finalize, we found the EUniQ exercise really rewarding. What was necessary in the end was dialogue over several meetings and several months, because at first our alliance and the EUniQ project were speaking completely different languages. So we needed time to get to know each other and to adapt and make it meaningful for both sides. But the competence of the panel was really strong, even if we would hope that there would be more expertise represented among more representatives in the future, but this was just a pilot, of course. And so we really would like to see the further development of the EUniQ project, but we call really much coming back to what Clara was saying earlier, to keep a lean approach and where possible to subsidiarity. We're working to national frameworks with our 8 universities. We don't see the point of those being replaced, but to create a system of working together where it makes sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you. Well, let's move directly next to the next one, Matthias Adam for Unite. So keep your questions coming. We see that there are quite a few of them already, and you can also give your thumbs up for those that you would really like to have answered. So we'll be able to pick up on those. Okay, Matthias, please.
Thank you, Maria. My name is Matthias Adam. I'm the task force coordinator of Unite for quality management. And I will go into a few selected topics that we were concerned with in developing our quality management and working within the context of the EUniQ panel. First, one slide about us, the Unite Alliance. We are an alliance that spans from Finland to Portugal, from Alto Ilha to the Universidade de Lisboa, and 7 universities with a particular focus on bridging the gaps between engineering, science, technology, and the grand challenges of society. Here, one slide to give you a brief impression what we are working on at the moment these months. Just a few keywords. I would sum it up in three points. First, we are building standards, structures, and procedures for new and expanded collaborative activities spanning from education to research and innovation. Of course, we are also starting these activities, piloting, trying out new things, and collecting experiences and trying to improve those as we collect. And third, as probably all of us, we are very much in the digital format these days. And so digital tools and format are very much at the forefront of what we're doing at the moment. And as you see and probably experience in your everyday work, this involves a lot of video conferencing. One thing that we were doing very intensively over the last year was to develop our quality management, and this was triggered also to a large extent by being participating as a pilot in the EUniQ panel. Tomáš already mentioned it. It was a very ambitious time frame, so we started our alliance in November 2019, and we were 11 months into the alliance when we had our evaluation. Still, I think it was very valuable and very productive, perhaps even more productive as the time frame was so short. We have defined our principles and procedures for the quality management and are still ongoing in redefining them. So we are still working on this. As the QA framework as far as the QA framework is concerned, when you read it, you see, well, that framework has the presupposition that you have a fully developed alliance. And of course, we were not a fully developed alliance. We were a project 11 months into project time. But having this tension, I would say, was very productive. So the framework helped to functions as a guiding vision, and it helped us to plan and to design our transition from a project to an institutionalized alliance. And I think that that's something that we are all working on, starting as a project and wanting to end up as an institutionalized alliance. And so the QA framework, I think, has the right level of on which it addresses exactly this question. Now, two topics, some have already been touched upon, what we are working on in our quality management, what are challenges and goals. We are 7 universities from 7 European countries, so we share the European standard and guidelines and some things more. But still, we have established QA systems which are different, which are diverse, and which also have different dimensions of quality that they put emphasis on. We see that this diversity as a resource, as something which is valuable. You've seen we have a particular emphasis on engineering. There are different engineering traditions across Europe, and we want to benefit from these different quality dimensions. So this is something that we value a lot. On the other side, the diverging national regulations are an obstacle in many cases, particularly as concerned degree programs. So we see further need to go for further need to change, to open up these regulations. Something that also Emily has emphasized, and which is also very important to us, our quality assurance approach in the Alliance builds on mutual trust. For us, quality assurance by one partner university should be able to do the job for the purposes of the Alliance. We call this the representative use of the quality assurance systems. And in our case, okay, we are working together for 30 years in the cluster consortium, so we know each other very well, and we know each other's systems very well. This is something which has grown over time, but which is also something which is very important. The national regulations are a particular concern for us. As of now, we typically need case-to-case solutions around the diverging national regulations. This, I think, cannot be the standard if we really want to build up trans-European, inter-university campuses, where collaboration is the rule. And we think that we need opening clauses in our national regulations for deeper European collaboration. So we need representative QA instead of additive QA. And we feel that this should become a key characteristic of European quality assurance. A second challenge or goal that we had, well, second challenge is connected to the transition from a project to an institutionalized alliance that I already mentioned. An institutionalized alliance would be characterized by a coherent strategy, by consistent implementation of this strategy, by systematic adaptation of the strategy as experiences are coming up. And I think, and as we see it, establishing the quality cycles that you have in a standard quality management system exactly does the job here. So we is designed and are now building up the quality cycles that especially link strategy and activity across our 7 universities in our alliance. And of course, in the end, we aim at a quality culture where responsibility for quality is with the people who are responsible for the activities, where we have inclusive participation, of course, in particular also of the students, students concerning education, and where we also have active stakeholder involvement, for instance, of the employers. This slide is to give you a short glimpse of the quality management system as we've designed it. You see the standard quality management cycles here on the left-hand side, something that we call the strategy cycle, which is mainly based on which mainly involves the governing bodies of our university, the governing board, the steering committee, academic forum. And on the right-hand side, the activity cycle, which concerns the departments and units of our universities and all the quality management units of these universities. And of course, the important thing is how to link these two, how to link strategy of the entire alliance with activity in PDCA cycles.
Matthias, 1 minute, please.
That's fine. This is the last slide. What are directions for the future from our perspectives? I already mentioned it, but it's good to repeat. Obstacles from national QA regulations should be overcome. The European approach for joint master programs from our perspective goes in the right direction, but it does not yet do the job entirely. There are crucial further steps to go, and I said it, our view at the moment, but we are open. We know that the discussion is open and ongoing, but our view at the moment is to go towards representative QA, as I mentioned. Second, we still have very much sectoral and project approaches in the European programs, but we are building institutionalized alliances which cover all missions of a university. And I think there is also need in adaptation on this in this direction. The QA framework, I think, is a valuable step in these directions. It has exactly the right spirit concerning the overall approaches to the missions of the university, but also the national QA regulations. Perhaps concerning the missions, it could be there could be more work done on this, but especially concerning the institutionalized approach. And of course, from our perspective, national QA regulations and long-term EU report should follow now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthias. And then last but not least, of course, Anders Sepper from UFE. Please go ahead with your view on what you learned from this experience.
Thank you, Maria. My name is Anders Sepper. I'm the Quality Assurance Coordinator at UFE, and I'm also Vice Rector for Education at University of Antwerp, one of the partners of UFE. Now, the UFE Alliance, how do I go to the next slides? Just click. Yeah, thank you. UFE Alliance emerged from the EUniQ network. So we are all young European research-oriented universities with 10 academic partners from Finland to Cyprus, from UK, Essex to Torun in Poland, and also 4 non-academic partners with 3 non-profit organizations and 1 enterprise. This is how we are composed as UFE. Next slide. Well, shared values and the shared vision was our priority #1. And so our biggest aim is to become a model of young, student-centered, non-elitist, open and inclusive European universities, where collaboration is highly important in education, but also in research and towards society. And this means collaboration not only between institutions, where we start from common ideas and existing practices, and we want to gradually align and integrate our activities and governance, but also in a quadruple helix model with cities and citizens, with enterprises and organizations, and with local communities and governments. And students are really co-creators in UFE. They are full partners in our ecosystem. They are involved in all boards, in all work packages, and in all decision-making bodies. We think this is very important to have our students really as co-creators. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our focus areas are really inspired by societal challenges. It's about European identity and responsibilities in the global world, about citizens' well-being, digital societies, and sustainability. And the key deliverables of course, is about student mobility, blended, so physically and virtually, where we work through open programs. And these open programs, they encompass both curricular and extracurricular elements, with, for example, volunteering work next to courses that leads to ECTS credits. And then, of course, also for staff, the career development, then connecting and co-creating with the stakeholders and collaborating with local government. Next slide, please. Well, our UFE quality plan is one of the 8 work packages in UFE. Work package 1 is management, but quality is the second work package. And as management and quality are both, of course, horizontal work packages, then we have work package 3 until 6. It's how we call it, students, staff, the innovation, and the cities. These are our flagships, as you can see on the next slide. And then diversity and inclusivity and sustainability and dissemination are again horizontal work packages. Now, quality is related to all work packages, of course, and a vision is very important for the development of the activities. And that's why the setup of an internal quality assurance system was one of our first deliverables, with the first version last summer. And we started with the implementation last semester in parallel with the deployment of the first possibilities for students. And before the start of UFE, we conducted a survey on the quality assurance in all the academic partners. And the aim was to make an inventory of shared values, of similar processes, of comparable approaches, and to see how we could build a common, mutual shared UFE quality assurance system. And the next slides summarize the key elements and the building blocks of this shared system. First, the foundation of our QA framework is determined by 5 basic principles, with quality culture at the center. We have trust, what we already heard from other alliances, trust in the quality of each partner's initiatives, but without taking this for granted. It has to be accounted for. And then the appreciative approach is also important in our alliance, because it allows to further develop the quality culture, because everyone takes responsibility for the quality of education and considering their own context within our common model. This is an important basic principle. Next, the subsidiarity. This allows, of course, for all actors to take the lead as experts and to have control, but it also means shared ownership, which is very important in such a big alliance and such a big organization. Then also key is continuous improvement, which is effected by means of a systematic PDCA approach. And the task force, the quality assurance task force, oversees the implementation and helps to share the best practices. Now, together with the trust, we also need, of course, transparency. This is really a necessary condition for trust. And it means that objective information must be provided on all activities in the partner institutions, but also on the new UFE activities. And then finally, the involvement of internal and external stakeholders. This constitutes a crucial complement, because it's realized by means of our quadruple helix model, as I already said, and it also makes our alliance a real part of the society. So these are the basic principles. And in the next slide, you can see the 3 dimensions of our QA. So the first dimension in our quality assurance framework is the quality assurance in UFE partner institutions. So as already explained, our framework is based on the expertise of all partners, and the common principles are summarized in our 5 basic principles. And we really do not want to create an additional layer of UFE quality assurance for existing processes, but we trust each other, be it in combination with complete transparency. And then the exchange of knowledge, of expertise, and of practices is key through events, but also through the regular task force meetings in all work packages. And this is really meant to strengthen the quality culture in each of the partner institutions. So no extra layer for what's happening in the partners, but we want to work on the added value. And that's what you can see in the 2nd and the 3rd dimension. So the 2nd dimension is the quality of assurance of our open programs, everything which what we are doing for our students. Now, the open programs consist of activities that yield credits, but also activities that are needed to obtain a UFE degree future. And the quality assurance is a common responsibility of the UFE Alliance and of all the partners, and therefore ownership is very important. And some of the components will be organized by one of the partners, and then the partner will be responsible. Other components will be new initiatives of UFE, and then the Alliance or one of the task forces or the bodies is responsible. And the PDCI cycle is followed by the organizing body with, of course, the design, the implementation, the monitoring, and the adjustments. And then the UFE monitoring on top of that, which, well, this explicitly deals with the added value of UFE on top of what the partners are doing. And it also acts on an aggregate basis in order to oversee all the different initiatives. And then a third dimension, well, at this moment is all the same for all alliances. UFE is also a project with deliverables, with outputs, which are laid down in the proposal. And therefore, we also monitor the quality of these deliverables by defining quality assurance indicators that link the outputs to the UFE vision. And we always work with a combination of quantitative and qualitative indicators, such as participation, which is quantitative, of course, about accessible information, and also about satisfaction or awareness. And then these indicators are measured by means of instruments, where we always try to use as much as possible existing tools in the partners or developed by the partners in order to end up with a lean system, a word I already heard in the other alliances too, which is very important, not to create a huge quality assurance monster, let's say. It has to be a lean system which really works and which strengthens the quality culture. Now, in the next slide, you can see our quality assurance workflow. In this case, for the surveys, but we also have the same workflow for other instruments and tools. And the first phase, phase one, is in fact a phase of development and implementation. And it's always work package 2 is a quality plan. So the development of a survey is always done by work package quality plan together with the work package, which is in place for in line with the ownership. Then before using and implementing, we always use a diversity and inclusivity check by a work package on diversity and inclusivity. Then there is a Qualtrics implementation in case it's a survey by the quality plan work package. And then the owner of the survey, when it's a survey to students, then it's of course a student journey. The owner work package will get the survey to the target. This is the first phase, the implementation, development and implementation.
And
then,
one minute, please.
Yes. And then phase 2, it's the analyzing phase, and that's where we have the loop where we make an analysis of the results in the quality reports. Then we send it to the work package, which is responsible for interpretations and conclusions. And then we report everything to the strategy board, and perhaps we can, if possible, we can disseminate. And next slide, it's about our participation in the EUniQ framework. Well, our participation was really a very nice experience where we learned a lot. And we were, in fact, very happy with the EUniQ framework, as the criteria and the standards are very natural and in line with our approach in UFE. And the PDCA cycle is really our foundation, and the framework standards are very much in line with this. And on next slide, you can see the last part. We really believe in the appreciative approach for several reasons. First one is that all alliances work with different models, which means that any evaluation has to start from the context of the alliance concerned. Second, the national legislations are not identical, and that affects, of course, the choices made by the alliances. And also this point can be overcome at this moment by such an appreciative approach. And of course, an appreciative approach is the method to strengthen the quality culture, provided there is a basic quality, of course, in each partner. And it also helps to overcome the difficulty of the short term and the long term. At this moment, we are more working as a project, not yet as a full-fledged European university. But because of this tension between the short term and the long term, the framework has to be read and interpreted together with the stage of the project in collaboration. And in EUFE, we really believe that the appreciative approach, together with the framework of UNIT, can help to provide this solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you. A lot of food for thought, for sure, from these reports, and a lot of questions have arisen from the participants. But I will first start. I would like to ask all the panelists to put their video on, if that's possible, please. Also the chairs of the panel. Just briefly to present the chairs of the panel to you before we go ahead, because then we will just be moving quickly from one to the other. Frank Buston, chair for the Utopia panel, has not been able to join us today, but we do have the three other panel chairs. That's Hans de Witt, who was the chair for the Una Europa panel, Daniel Schneider, chaired the Unite panel, and Liz Marr chaired the EUFE panel. So the one that we just heard about for last. So I do have the first question that I will address first to all the panel chairs for their perspective, but I give also a chance to the alliances to respond to that. You have one sentence. I'm asking for a very complicated question, which is, what should be the purpose of a European quality assurance framework for European universities? Clara Engels was referring to, she was saying we need a clear purpose for that framework. And we've seen different views of what that purpose could be. Is it a guiding vision? Is it a self-assessment tool? Maybe it's simply facilitate discussions on quality assurance within the alliance to kind of build common understanding of where to go. Could it be a kind of an overarching external quality assurance framework that would replace national quality assurance? Or maybe it will just replace perhaps the project evaluation. So there are many possible interpretations of that purpose. So I'd like to ask Hans first, what do you see as the key purpose of such a framework?
Thank you. And yeah, it's nearly impossible to answer it in one sentence, so I will not accomplish that, but I will try to be as short as possible. Of course, the point is, and several of the presentations have been addressing that, in particular also the first one, Utopia and the recommendations, there is not a kind of shared concept or vision about what is a European university, what are European university alliances, and what is the EU project. That's still something which has to develop. The European university is much more the broader vision. The EU project is basically the implementation of the short-term activities. And then you have the alliances as being the ones that have been responding to both elements, the vision on the one hand and the short-term on the other hand. And that has been, to a certain extent, on an opportunistic way, because they had to force to apply, and not all of them, some of them were existing before. So they had to define a kind of concept of what they do. And then it becomes important to create a framework of quality assurance to see why are those alliances established, what are they doing and how are you doing, but also what is the impact of them. And if you do that only for the short term of the EU project, then you are just responding to the regulations of the European Commission. But you have to develop a much more long-term vision about what the framework is and how you can use the QA, the framework, as a way of improving the quality. So it has to be, as been said, transformative. It has to be visionary, but it also has to be flexible and appreciative, because you have to define the quality assurance according to the own mission and goals of the alliances. And as we have seen in the four presentations, each alliance is different. So you cannot create a kind of framework which is restrictive to we all have to be the same. So you have to be flexible. And in the Una Europa discussions that we had, we saw that they have a short-term focus on one Europe project, and at the same time they have a European alliances project. And if we, in the beginning, we even had intensive debates because they thought that we were going to evaluate the QA of the One Europe project. And we said, no, we want to discuss with you how we can develop a framework for the alliance in the long term. And at the end, I think it worked out very well, that discussion from both sides. So we came to a common understanding. We have to create a framework that has purpose, to improve the quality of the alliance. That's very important.
Yes, I think we see a lot of that little paradox there. What are we really talking about, the bigger vision or the EU project? So that's a very, very good message from you, Hans, there. Daniel, would you have something to add on this? What is your view on the purpose, perhaps beyond or differently from Hans?
Hello. Yeah, for me, I would say that it should be an instrument to promote a better learning experience for students. And so for me, it's just a part of change management tool. Okay. And in addition, maybe I should say that, as it has been said before, that we should allow alliances to set very different goals. Some can be very elitist, research oriented, and others, they could focus on local well-being of citizens, employment, and so forth. And so we should also help universities to achieve their strategic goals.
Thank you, Daniel. Liz, do you have something to add? How do you see that?
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit different, and I want to be more fundamental. So, what is quality assurance for at the end of the day? And the way I see it, as somebody who's really scared of flying, I would want to be assured that somebody who had trained to build, who had been on a course to build aircraft engines, had had the right level of education, the right learning experience, and that whichever university they went to, that they would have had an equal learning experience, so that I could have every confidence that the engines they build will keep the plane flying. So for me, quality assurance is fundamentally about the teaching and learning experiences of students, and it's output focused and outcome focused. So the framework that we're looking at here is I think, trying to do two things. It's one, to quality assure the organisation of the alliance itself, but it's also to quality assure the delivery of that alliance. So there's the horizontal and the vertical aspects to it. And I think this is where the meaty questions come in. And I'm going to stop in one moment, Maria, but just the meaty question, which has come all the way through here, is how do you reconcile the quality assurance frameworks and methods and approaches at the individual institutional level with the framework that's needed at the overarching level of the alliance itself? But I'm sure we'll come onto that in a moment.
Yes, indeed. That's a very good point. So we talk about two connections. One is that each one, of course, is in their national system, each of the alliance universities, but then also they have their own internal quality assurance mechanisms. And then there might be that level of complexity as well to bring together kind of the alliance joint internal approach. So how do you see those two could be aligned, the external quality assurance requirements and the internal quality assurance system of the alliance, if the alliance has one? Would you like to, let's immediately continue on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think all of our speakers so far have talked about trust, and I think that's what came across very much in the EUFA discussions we had. It's about trust in your partners and trust in the individual systems that they've been using, the national systems that they've been using. But I think there's a challenge in that. I worked a few years ago on a project called OPAL, Opening Up Universities for Lifelong Learning in Europe. And one of the big problems that we experienced was that universities were reluctant to recognize each other's credit, and sometimes even departments within universities reluctant to recognize their own credit. And there's something around trust there that needs building. And I think what we're seeing in the partnerships here is that move towards a trust-based approach. So I think we'll be able to reconcile those two things once we've got everybody accepting that a trust-based approach is possible. And I don't just mean the partners, I mean the assurance agencies, I mean the regulatory bodies in each of the nations. And that might be a dream, a vision, and it might be a long way down the road, but I think that's fundamental to what we need to do. And ultimately, why shouldn't we trust each other's outputs, frankly?
And that's a good point, Liz. And I think we have to dream big, because that's the only way to achieve something new. Daniel, would you like to reflect on that same question, how to align these external and internal dimensions of quality assurance?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I would say what others say too, you know, something like no doubling, trust, and so forth, subsidiarity. But in addition, I think there should be sort of a better understanding of what QA can do, which is now rather seen as a nuisance by most people, to be frank. Okay, so I would say that teaching should be understood as some kind of applied research. Okay, I mean, a teacher should be a reflective practitioner, and to do so, a teacher should look at data and use the data actually, and that's what the QA can do, provide data. And so that would be a nice starting point, just to have this idea accepted throughout the institution. And then the second thing is that one has to understand who should use which data. So I would say that use of data should start with the teacher and students, and then some of that data should flow up, you know, to for internal use, and then some for external use. And and the data flow should actually go down and not up when it go. I mean, there should be less data going up. And then in addition, I would say external evaluation also should look at context. I don't see the point of just evaluating a university when all around the university you have unemployment, crime, people being depressed and so forth. So that would be an additional task for external evaluation.
Thank you, Daniel. Hans, do you have something to add on that briefly?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I agree with what has been said before about the importance of trust and contextualizing, and what Emily in particular also pressed in her presentation about subsidiarity, which are important aspects. More important even, I think, is you have to see it as a kind of developing phase, because a lot of things are still very much in an early stage. The alliances are in an early stage. The issues of what has been presented about the European degree and all those kind of things are still not very much defined. So if you are trying to develop something which is very strict, it doesn't work. So you have to see it as a development where you have to find a kind of way how to balance between what is an alliance and defining the quality assurance on the alliance aspect, taking into account what the individual institutions in the national context do. And gradually that develops. That's why I think, I'm not quite sure who said that, but one of the presentations, I think it was EUniQ, the framework has to be a guiding vision. It has to develop itself and not being too much forced from above to do that, because then you can very much look into, in a flexible way, what is the framework for the alliances and what are the national frameworks that the individual institutions in the alliance have to work on. But for me, the framework has to focus very much on getting a clear understanding of what the alliances' rationales are, and define the framework according to that.
Thank you, Hans. I have one little question still. I will address that to actually the alliances now, and then I will get to the questions from the audience. We have talked a lot about subsidiarity. Clara was also saying shouldn't add complexity, we shouldn't add things that will not make sense. Of course, I think what we do should make sense. In the longer term vision, now this was a pilot, and we are very grateful that you all had the enthusiasm and courage and stamina to get involved in this exercise, because this is the way that we can learn and build something together. But in the longer term vision, if this is really to become like a usable, useful, interesting tool for the alliances, not for the project, but kind of for the real collaboration evaluation. One thing, what would it take for an alliance for you to be willing to take part in such an evaluation? Could be referred to your national framework, it could be a discount on your accreditation. What would be the one thing that they say, that would really motivate us to do this again? Matthias, do you want to start?
Well, I think I have an answer in one sentence. If the evaluation replaces the project evaluations, I mean, and much of what has been said by Hans and by Daniel and by Liz, I think directs in this direction, that it would make sense. We, as an institutionalized alliance, should be judged by experts as to what our goals are, what the context is in which we work, what the procedure, the internal procedures for achieving those goals are, and so on and so forth. And we must we must leave the project logics and enter an institutionalized logics. This is, I mean, Hans, you said it. Much is unclear where it is going to, but this would be my vision.
Thank you, Matthias. Emily, would you like to say what would make you do this all again?
Yeah, I would agree with what Matthias just said. I mean, we have to be looking towards a longer, sustainable vision beyond projects. And I think what's important to build on, also in relation to what Matthias said, is that we're not just creating structures for educational collaboration. I mean, these alliances are also very much building research and innovation collaboration. From the perspective of EUNA-Europa, we're also really looking to promote what it is to be the sustainable university that protects the climate, and also very much a global dimension. So we're focusing at the moment about how to have a big impact in the world, and in particular reaching out to African partners. So what would be very motivating for us is that if the panel on the outside of this EUniQ follow-up could really just also reflect that expertise, not just in relation to the educational aspects that we're doing, but also the broader aspirations that we have as a holistic alliance.
Thank you. Anne?
Yes, I would say, well, quality assurance is also about quality culture. It's about quality development, quality enhancement. And so I think as EUniQ now has, the experience now with EUniQ was, it's kind of a rather natural but open framework, which really has an added value. And this added value is important. It should be an added value on top of what we are already doing in the internal quality assurance, in the alliance, in the external quality assurance systems, and the national systems at this moment. So I think what it was now, it was really an added value. And this is much importance to participate in a subsequent project.
Thank you, Anne. Thomas?
Yes, thank you. As I said at the beginning, it was a rewarding exercise period. So basically we would do it all over again. Obviously, it helps if it reduces burdens in some other aspect of what we're doing, because obviously we're all stressed out with various activities and things we have to do. What I would see as the most rewarding factor is to be, for the panel or for the process, to be alert to our principles. So basically we set out several principles according to which we're trying to design, let's say, pedagogical innovation. So basically, if the panel, if the process can actually guide us or help us to be steered according to those principles, and those principles are like student-centered teaching and learning, inclusive university, problem-based learning, and so on. So, and also global impact. If these are the principles that can be nurtured through these processes, then this could actually be just another added value to what we already experienced.
Thank you. I think we've had quite interesting inputs on that topic as well now. We have quite a few questions in the questions and answers section from the participants, and I will just fire away with those, and the first taker can respond to that from the panel. So this is for anybody who feels they can respond to that. In your experience, has the EUniQ project learned any lessons from the implementation problems that we have had and still have with the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs? Was that something that came up in the discussions? Did you address that at all during your experience? Emily, please.
Yeah, thanks. This is a very good question. I think had the EUniQ evaluations taken place a few months later, this could have really been a good area of discussion. But as it happened like almost 6 months ago, we were not really in the position to already go via the European approach, which we are now. But I have to say that we've come across a number of bottlenecks when, for instance, working on our development of the European Bachelor in European Studies, and I'm very happy to share them. I don't know if we can go through the list now, but this will certainly feed into this discussion on the European degree, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily. I think one of the suggestions that came from the consortium partners met yesterday already for some internal discussions. And one of the possible ideas of saying perhaps those who go through this kind of a alliance quality assurance process could then be allowed to self-accredit their own joint programs of the alliance. So maybe that would be also kind of an incentive to do that and give a kind of the sufficient guarantees or basis of trust to do that. But anyway, so Daniel, you also showed a hand. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I just learned during the procedure that dialogue is very important and building shared understanding, and this is very much underestimated. I think it may take at least half a year to understand what ESG could mean, or what what other regulations, terms, and concepts mean, and this is totally underestimated. More dialogue.
Yeah, thank you. I see there are this is a message to the panelists, quite a few questions that are specifically for one of you. So if you'd like to then, during the break or after the break, to go in there and answer those. But I do pick up one, which I think might be perhaps rather a suggestion, is how to include all 41 university alliances in a follow-up project of EUniQ. And then also we have another one, which is perhaps related a little bit. How do we develop this shared vision of quality assurance for European universities? How can, if all consortiums are to be involved, how can this be facilitated? So I saw those two a little bit as linked. Do you have any ideas to how to do that, how to build that shared vision? Hans, please.
Well, first of all, on the practical side, I think it's nearly impossible in a pilot project to do it with 41 institutions. Let's be realistic about that. That would be an enormous cost, but also an enormous energy and also time related to that. So we have to do something with a good selection of different types. So we have to look into a typology of different alliances, which might be the way to approach it, and then make a selection out of that. And that also relates to the question of the shared vision. Again, I'm very clear about it. Alliances are created by their own objectives, and still, as I said before, in an opportunistic way, because they had to respond to a call. Some have had already a previous history, but most not. We have to be careful about, you need to have some kind of shared vision of what an alliance is, but not that the alliance should all be the same. You have to create that kind of flexibility, and that's why a typology is important, to see what different types of alliances we have, and then how can you create a framework that is usual in those different types of institutions. And that will be, I think, important for the next phase of a EUniQ project.
Thank you very much. So it's kind of the common basis. We have to be reassured that we do speak the same language in terms of quality assurance language, even though we do speak different mother tongues. And I think that's related nicely to a comment that Daniel put in the chat, that jointness and integration should start by accepting this diversity. That's the kind of key word in Europe. That's what we love. We love the diversity, and it creates us so many problems. But nevertheless, that's what we have in our hands. Daniel, yes.
Yeah, just would add an extra thing, time. There's always a problem doing something that's sustainable. And from what I know from research, if you want to do a change in one single institution, you count at least 15 years. And so Europe is not, it does not promote sustainable projects in that sense, because they all end after 3 or 6 years.
Mhm.
And we got lots of remarks from EUnite partners that that the whole thing may be threatened if there is no more financing.
Mhm. Thank you. One very last question where I can allow one person, first come, first serve, to react on that. That's actually a very interesting question. All European universities' missions really have strong societal dimensions, but we haven't really heard about the impact related to quality assurance in this respect. Are there any developments or good practice? Because this really seems to be quite a challenge, how to evaluate and how to connect quality assurance with the societal dimension. If there is somebody who wants to reflect on that, hot potato.
Well, I think Emily said it very well, that you have to look at other dimensions of the alliances than only on the educational side, and the society is a very important part of that. The work that EUneuropa does in Africa is a very clear example that they want to approach to that. So looking at sustainable development goals, the combination with the private sector and the non-educational actors, that is an important part of what the alliances do. And that's one of the risks, that if we focus too much on the short-term Erasmus Plus projects, that we only focus on the educational side and lose the side. Because, I mean, we had a discussion with EUneuropa, for instance, that they said, well, we have to tick the box of the European Commission on our One Europe project, and that takes us so much energy, but also it doesn't give us time to look at the broader picture. And so the European Commission also has to be much more looking at the short term in the long term perspective of the alliances. And the alliances also have to be careful that they don't fall into the trap that they focus so much on accomplishing the European project that they forget about the broader picture. So that's the challenge, I think, is the most important one in the current phase that we face.
Thank you, Hans. And very finally, very briefly, Thomas. No,
yes, yes, I'll be very brief. I'll just directly respond to the question. I mean, obviously, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge to measure the impact after three years of activity. If you know that basically the societal impact is something which is so complex even to measure. So basically, what we try to do is actually is focus on inclusion already in the design of the project, as well as when we're designing different mechanisms and so on. So basically here, it's a culture change, I would say. But then obviously we also want to evaluate the impact in the long term. So basically we do know that Erasmus Plus projects have an expiry date, but we're not limited by this expiry date. So basically we're building an alliance, and obviously in 10 and 15 years, we're going to see the impact. And this is what our mission is.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the panelists. This was very interesting, at least to me. I hope also to participants. I'm sure everybody is right now applauding you virtually. And we are happy now to call on a coffee break, which I will apologize already will be 3 minutes shorter than planned. We hope to see you all back at 11:30 for some other interesting and exciting inputs. So have a nice coffee break and see you soon. Very good. Welcome back. I see the people might be still having their coffee, or hopefully not. In any case, we are ready to start the last hour of today's webinar. We have with us now Patrick van den Bosch from the Flemish Higher Education Council Quality Assurance, EUniQ. And in particular, he's here today with us as in his capacity as the external evaluator of the EUniQ project. So Patrick has been with us throughout the project and has talked to the different partners and the participating institutions, etc., to collect and analyze some feedback and to let us know how we're doing and give his recommendations on the way forward. So Patrick, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. I want to share a presentation with you. I hope you can see my presentation right now. Okay, great. So yes, my name is Patrick van den Bosch from EUniQ, the Flemish Quality Assurance Agency, and I'm here as the observer, external evaluator of the EUniQ project. And in this project, it's my task to see if the deliverables of the project are met, and of course, to give recommendations to the project coordinator. But besides that, I also had the opportunity to look from a certain distance to the whole project. Of course, a lot of things has been done in this project. We have this roadmap group with representatives of the quality assurance agencies and the stakeholders, the resonance group with the ministries. And of course, I also had a lot of meetings with the project coordinator. Magali Soenen already elaborated on the different activities that have taken place the last 2 years in this project, and of course that have been the pilots. And based on the 4 pilots, we have conducted some surveys, and in February we had also some focus group meetings with the panel members, the representatives of the alliances and the process coordinators. And based on all the information that they shared with me and with the project coordinator, I tried to make an analysis. And yesterday we already discussed a lot, because yesterday the representatives from the alliances of the pilots, the panel members and the process coordinators, they came together to discuss, and it was really a fruitful discussion. We discussed how to prepare for this evaluation, about the panel composition, the site visits, and also how to write a report. It's all very interesting, and we will give you some more information about this aspect later on in the dissemination conference, because in 6 months we have the final dissemination conference. Today, it is only some stock taking to see where we are now, because I'm confident that we will succeed in doing still a lot of things, but there are a lot still to be done. But I want to share some observations about 4 key points: the aim of the pilot, the timing of the pilot, the framework, and the role of the coordinator. If we look first at the aim of the pilot, I have to say that if you look at the EUniQ project, there was a thorough preparation. We had the preparatory events, the resonance and roadmap group meetings, and of course we had on-time delivery of well-designed documents. So I have to compliment the process coordinator for this, because officially the project deliverables of the EUniQ project until now are met. So that's very good news. But then I also want to dig a little bit deeper into this question. Do the alliances, the panel members and the process coordinators, do they have sufficient information, sufficient information to prepare for this evaluation? Well, in our survey, we asked this question to them, and you can see here that no one said no. The panel members were rather confident that they received sufficient information. But if you look at the answers that we received from the alliances, there are still a lot of questions at the time they had to prepare for the site visits. And let me take you now back to Rome to give an answer. Why do the alliances had still some questions when they had to prepare for the event? Let me take you back to Rome. I didn't insert any picture of Rome, of a conference in Rome, because that would bring too much nostalgia to times where we could travel freely. But in this peer support and kickoff event in Rome, where representatives of the alliances, the ministries, and the quality assurance agencies were present, we started this project. And afterwards, we asked in a survey to the participants what they found of this conference. And they all agreed that there were a lot of new insights that were gained. They said, well, this conference is maybe a little too early in time because especially the alliances were still in the starting process of making their European university. But the objective of the event, which was producing a draft of the framework, was successful. Everyone, or almost everyone present, found that there was a good idea of this framework, but it still needed some fine-tuning. On the other hand, the participants felt that this framework, that there was not real ownership of this framework yet, because it was not fully clear what the scope, what the purpose, what the aim of this pilot would be. And then again, this framework, would this framework also be used in the future, or was this just a framework to use it for now? And on top of that, there was a fear of binding standards, because what do we want? What do we want? What kind of framework do we want? What kind of evaluation do we want? So all in all, I have to say, the aim of the framework was still a question that was under debate. And maybe if you listened to the debate earlier this morning, I think still this purpose is in debate. Is this an enhancement-led evaluation? Is the focus more on accountability? Or is the idea of replacing the institutional evaluations, national systems, by this kind of evaluation, is this something we have to strive for in the future? Or is this some kind of utopia? If you ask me, I don't think we will be able to replace this institutional evaluation by alliance evaluation in the 2020s, but who knows? But is this something we have to aim for or not? Another question that came from all involved was the question, what are we going to evaluate? Is this an evaluation of the alliance as it is now? Is an evaluation of the potential of what the alliance can be, could be, must be? Or is it just an evaluation of this European Commission project? These are all things that still has to be clarified. And I don't think this is too late to clarify this, because we had a very interesting experience within the pilot, but now the time is right for the next coming months to stress what the real purpose of the pilot will be on the policy level. On a practical level, it has to be made clear what, even when on the policy level the scope will be clear, there always will be a need on the practical level to train the panels, to train people who will join the panel, to make them also aware of the scope and to prepare the alliance, because the scope of alliance evaluations will always be different from institutional or program evaluations. So a good preparation is important. And finally, we have to keep in mind what the purpose must be. We want to have a sustainable alliance, and before you can create a fully a good quality assurance framework for an alliance, then you really have to know what an alliance has to be. So first we have to define what an alliance should be, and then we can finally agree on what a quality assurance framework for an alliance can be. The second topic I want to discuss with you is the timing. The evaluation almost coincided with the launch of the alliance. This was stated many times by the representatives of the alliances and the panel members in the meetings I had with them. So the reality is that only a few results could be observed. There were a lot of plans and developments. And there it was also different in the 4 pilots. In some of the alliances already prepared a lot of information, while others still had to start from scratch at the time the site visit was planned. Let's come to the question, was this site visit, this whole pilot, too early? We can say it was rather early, but on the other hand, this pilot was also an interesting zero measurement. Where are we now? And in some cases, there was a kind of appreciative approach used by the panel, and there it was really enhancement-led. And I heard from those alliances that they were really happy that they received a lot of interesting recommendations, food for thought, to continue their work. We also heard from some panel members that they thought maybe in this phase of the alliances, in this early phase, some kind of evaluation is not yet appropriate, but some kind of continuous monitoring would be more appropriate. But then we still have this gray line between consultancy and evaluation. But these are some reflections I want to share with you. Another aspect in timing is that the site visit was postponed due to the COVID-19 crisis. But although, yeah, this was rather stressful in the beginning, I heard from both panels and alliances that they were happy that they had more time to prepare more thoroughly for the site visits. And also the scope of the site visit became more clear to them as time went by. All the evaluations were online evaluations. So the negative aspect about these online evaluations is that you have a lack of body language. On the other hand, there were no travel costs. And in this way, this was a more cost-effective exercise. And maybe, but we did not know a year ago, maybe this online working is also in the nature of the alliances, because a lot of institutions from different countries have to work together, and where some of us thought, well, every time we travel to another country to meet and to discuss with each other, I think in the future a lot of meetings will be replaced by online meetings. We discussed also yesterday with the panels and with the alliances that undertook the pilot, what do you see for the future? Some hybrid evaluations, on-site and online evaluations. In fact, what I heard already a lot of different suggestions, but all in all, what we heard yesterday is that the suggestion from the alliances and the pilot and the panel members is to spread the on-site visits and the online, to have an on-site visit and an online visit, and to spread it in time. For instance, by starting with an on-site visit and to continue over time with some short online meetings. This gives more time to reflect on the different topics and to do it more in depth. The third of the four things I want to discuss with you is the framework. This framework, does the focus has to be in education, or does the focus has to be on all elements that bind an alliance? And does this focus has to be ESG based? This was already debated in our first meeting, and still, like I also heard this morning, it's still under debate. But what we heard from all involved is that the framework criteria were in fact applicable also in this early stage of the development of the alliance. The only question is how to use the framework. If you are going to use it very strict, then we have to say, well, there is still a lot to do before you comply with the criteria, but it was very useful according to panel members and the alliances. The framework was, however, meant to evaluate a running QA system rather than a project still to be implemented. Well, yes, that was, of course, the case. Okay, this framework was then okay, yes, according to panel members and alliances, but the panels themselves, did they have the right expertise to evaluate the alliance? Yes, all agreed more or less that they had a good expertise to evaluate the alliance. Though it was said that maybe in the future we have to rethink how to compose the panel and maybe reflect on having more different areas of expertise on board. And it will also depend on the scope of the evaluation. The report. We have now already 4 reports, but those reports are not public. You can read the summaries on the project website, but I think that these reports can be a source of inspiration for the further development of the European universities. And I really do understand that the alliances in the pilots that do not want to publish the report because of the early stage, but I think we can learn from what is said in those as pilots. So I hope that based on not only based on the summaries, but based on the full reports, also in the near future, some good practices will be shared, as was already done this morning. The panel members and the process coordinators found it in this early stage rather easy to write the reports because many aspects were still under development. But on the other hand, it was somehow difficult to know what was really meaningful in the report for the alliance. And of course, there was also some fear that the things that they were writing, that they also could be used in a negative way, because there was still a lot of things to implement, and that could be contra-beneficial for the alliance. But all in all, we have to say the framework is a sound and operational framework for this pilot. But there is a variety of alliances, and we expect that a tailor-made approach of the framework has to be implemented. We have to be flexible in dealing with this framework, but the framework itself has also to become, let's say, more flexible. So it has to be implemented. It has to be used for the different alliances, because what we can expect is that the focus of the different alliances will be different in the future. What was said now already after the pilots is that the potential of the current framework was not fully exploited, which means that if there was somehow a more open discussion in some of the pilots, and not that fear of this binding framework, which will have repercussions in the future for the alliance, then it could have been used more open. And finally, the fourth aspect I want to discuss with you is a process coordinator. There are 2 process coordinators from European Quality Assurance Agency, and it was really an interesting experience to bring those 2 people together to coordinate the evaluation. But those coordinators, they did not have any expertise to build on, and there was, of course, a training for the panels and the coordinators, but we think that in the future, an explicit training of coordinators would be also very useful, because we saw some cultural differences. Not all were used to work with this appreciative approach. Some of them are used to be the secretary of the panel, but in some quality assurance agencies, those process coordinators are not. So also for the process coordinators, it was sometimes difficult because this was still a pilot. The process coordinator was also the QA person in the panel. It was a mixed up role, because he had to be the diplomatic one, talking independent with the alliances. But on the other hand, he was a QA person in the panel. I can suggest that we have a panel member that can take up this role in the future. But all in all, everyone said there was good guidance by the project coordinator. What do we expect in the future from a process coordinator? Well, he has to be an experienced QA person with a broad knowledge of the higher education systems in the European higher education area, and especially someone who has some diplomatic skills in dealing with the different alliances and the cultures, different cultures of panel members. What I suggest is some kind of toolkit for process coordinators. And this can be related to what already exists in the INPIA project for the European approach for external quality assurance of joint programs. And then last suggestion is to make one agency responsible for the process coordination. And I know that in the presentation of the representative of the European Commission, that Ms. Engels, that she suggested to have the 2 agencies on board. But this in the future, it might be more practical to have only one agency as the process coordinator, of course, staying in good contact with the others involved. Finally, I want to give you some recommendations. So clarify the objective of the evaluation for the alliances. I think this is already clear. Reflect on the cost-benefit ratio for physical or online site visits. Reflect on what would be a good combination of it. Consider spreading the evaluation more in time, starting with an evaluation on day X and then a couple of weeks, months later, a second follow-up visit before you come to your conclusions. One of the aspects was also to consider continuous external monitoring in this early phase of establishing alliances. What I heard was that the framework does not need a significant update, but I can suggest to make it more flexible so it is more fit for purpose for the different alliances. And as we already said, please use the full potential of the framework. Make the reports public, but also share the substantive good practices identified in the panel. It was done this morning, but I think it can also be done in the next months. The idea of having some kind of platform where also the other alliances that now are still in this early phase can share their first experiences will be a good practice. Make one agency responsible for the process coordination and then provide training for panels, for the alliances, and for the process coordinators. There is still a lot of work to be done in the future, but all in all, I can say that the project deliverables, they are met until now, and all who is involved is really satisfied with the current results. Although, as was mentioned earlier today by Emily Palmer, in the beginning of the meetings, it was that they spoke other languages, those panels and alliances. But all in all, everyone is satisfied with the current results. There are a lot of areas for improvement, but we still have 6 months within the project. But even then, the work will not be done. But what we expect in the near future is that decisions that to be made on the policy level. Of course, taking into account the results of the pilot and this continuous dialogue with all stakeholders, especially also with the roadmap group and the resonance group within the project. But do not forget all alliances and sharing of expertise between all alliances. And I really mean all alliances is a must. How we are going to do this in a follow-up project or creating a platform, that's we have to see what is feasible, but I'm really convinced that sharing of expertise is a must. And I think I've used my time now.
Patrick, thank you very much. I think it's very precious for us to have this bird's eye view from a little bit from the outside, but with an understanding of the inside as well. So we take up all those recommendations. And indeed, like you were rightly saying, this is not yet even the end of the project, let alone the end of the framework. So in some sense, a lot of work has taken place. But there's a lot of work that we have to do in the coming months and possibly years in particular if we want to make this kind of a really usable and used tool that also gets into the policy making mechanisms at the EU level, but then also from my perspective, I hope also in the European higher education area level, so the wider European framework for higher education. Now we have the last presentation comes from Mark Fredericks from the NVRO, the coordinator of this project. And indeed, Mark will tell us something about what we've taken from these pilots and what is the implications of those experiences for the framework of quality assurance for the European universities. So Mark, please go ahead.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Maria. I'm just trying to share my presentation now.
Yeah, we can see that.
Yes. Yeah, there it is. So we have heard from Patrick about the outcomes of the evaluation of the pilots, which also contain many useful suggestions for the framework. And we need to discuss this more in detail in the coming months of the project, of course. What I would like to present now is what some of the main implications of the framework could be. And as most of you are not familiar with the framework, I will first mention the different aspects of the framework and then highlight for each of these aspects some relevant outcomes of the evaluation of the pilots, as well as the implication that this could have for the framework. Let's first remind ourselves briefly about what the purpose of the framework and the EUniQ project is. Of course, we're now in the very early stages of the European universities, the time when internal quality assurance systems for the Alliance are being designed. It's a time for experimentation to see what works, what doesn't work. However, at some point, what is being developed by European universities will be subject to external quality assurance. Think, for instance, of the joint programs that need to be accredited. This is already happening now, as we've heard. Or later on, when a significant amount of provision is organized by the member universities within the context of the Alliance, the question is how in institutional reviews this joint provision can be assessed. It's clear that if there would be multiple external quality assurance procedures in different countries, that this would be burdensome for the Alliance, and if these procedures would potentially be contradictory or not suitable for the context of an Alliance, it would be problematic. So the ultimate aim is that alliances can be evaluated with one European quality assurance framework and one quality assurance procedure. That's the ultimate purpose, but of course it's clear that this process will take quite a lot of time, probably. For the development of this framework, input was gathered from the alliances and project partners. We held a survey. There's the workshop in Rome again that we organized with the first 17 alliances. The comments on the draft quality assurance framework, which were also the alliances commented on that, and also the resonance group, the 6 ministries in the resonance group. And then it was finalized by the EUniQ roadmap group, which consists of the 8 quality assurance agencies, but also of ESU, EUA, and ENCA, of course. The evaluation principles of the framework, well, it consists of 3 elements. Criteria describe what is expected from a fully developed European university. Reference points indicate for each criterion relevant elements of the European Universities Initiative goal. And the panel takes the stage of development of a European university and its internal quality assurance system into account when making the evaluation. The criteria are based on the following interrelated questions, which were already mentioned this morning by Magali Zunen, so I'm not going to repeat them, just highlight the key words: vision, realize, monitor, improvement, and ESG. You can see this clearly in the criteria. The 4 evaluation criteria follow the PDCA cycle, as was also pointed out by Anders Schepper this morning. Each criterion has 4 reference points, to illustrate this with the first criterion on strategy and policy, where the criterion is the European University strategy and policies enable the realization of an inter-university campus which assures, in close collaboration with internal and external stakeholders, the quality of a joint provision that responds to societal challenges. And the reference points then refer to the vision on quality of education with links to research, innovation, and service to society. So these links are made in the framework also in different places, involving all internal and external stakeholders. And the challenge-based approach, which is of course an important characteristic of European universities. And a fourth reference point here is quality assurance policies for joint provision that are aligned with the European standards and guidelines for quality assurance. As said before, the panel takes into account the stage of development of the alliance. The evaluation in the pilot was based on the appreciative approach, which also implies that choices made by the alliance are appreciated, that the timelines set by the alliance are respected, and that the approaches taken by the alliance are not disputed. Within this context given by the alliance, it is possible for the panel to state for each criterion what still needs to be developed or what is partially or already developed. It is also self-evident that in the starting phase of a European university, not much will already be developed. The evaluation is based on enhancement, and the panel behaves as critical friends. This may always be important, but it is certainly now, considering the early stage of developments, where it is very much a learning process for all. And the focus should be on the strengths and further development of the internal quality assurance system. Let's now have a look at what was said about these principles and the evaluation of the pilots and what consequences this could have for the framework. The four criteria seem suitable and logical, as said by the alliances. These are based on the PDCA cycle and are also familiar from institutional reviews. The evaluation contributed to the starting process, but evaluation is difficult at the start, as many activities are under construction. Evaluation of the improvement policy was not really possible at this stage. To some extent, this applies to all criteria as long as the internal quality assurance system has not been set up. Therefore, the proposal is to keep the four criteria in the framework, but only evaluate these criteria after the internal quality assurance system is working, when it is more than just plans. The reference points illustrate the long-term expectations for, for alliances from the core. But these may not already be in the DNA of the alliances at the start. The alliances tend to focus more on the shorter-term EU project, as was already mentioned also in the panel discussion. So for the framework, it would be good to have a more flexible approach for it. Could be clarified before the start of the evaluation what perspective the alliance is taking and whether the reference points will be applied. An alternative, especially for starting alliances, could be to focus on answering the evaluation questions instead of looking at the reference points. With regard to the stage of development, it was noted by panels and alliances that there were sometimes different, they were talking about different timelines. Timeline of the long-term strategy is a different one than the timeline of the EU project again. Alliances may have strategies for 2020, 25, even 2050. But it's not always easy to see the activities that are carried out now or are planned for the coming years in the light of these long-term strategies. Again, the clarification of the development stage, the perspective the European University is taking, and also the expectations of the evaluation for both the Alliance and the panel should be discussed in the first meeting between the European University and the panel. The framework does take into account that at the start the written information is limited. Still, the project proposal is of course available, the partnership agreement may be available, joint work plan, mission statement, strategy and policy and internal QA documents may be present, albeit only at an early stage, as a draft, perhaps. It's not the intention to write documents especially for the evaluation, but realistically an external evaluation may speed up the writing of documents that were already planned. This was also mentioned by alliances. The Alliance also has the possibility to write a short appreciative self-evaluation in which for each of the criteria the developmental stage is explained. And it was agreed with the alliances, the pilot, that this would be an option and not required, although this would no doubt be very useful for the panels. Looking at the panel composition, a list of possible panel members was constructed by the roadmap group, and nominations from alliances and project partners were possible. The selection of the panel members was made by the agency. Each panel consisted of a chair, an expert, and a student, so 12 members in total for 4 pilots. When composing the list of possible panel members, many different types of expertise were taken into account: educational and research expertise, expertise regarding innovation and service to society, senior expertise with university networks and university management, student-related expertise, internationalization, QA, and e-learning experience. But when composing panels of only 3 experts, and based on availability, it was not easy to have all this expertise represented in all panels, of course. Of course, the panel members had to sign a statement of independence and confidentiality. The 2 process coordinators from 2 QA agencies in each panel were given an advisory role regarding QA, also to complement the fact that there were only 3 panel members in some aspects, at least in the QA aspect. Process coordinators were responsible for writing the draft panel report and the minutes of meeting. And as said already, a 1-day training workshop with the expert process coordinators was organized as preparation for the evaluations. The plan was to have a site visit of 1 full day at 1 location with representatives of all the universities and stakeholders. That's quite short, but the only way to have so many representatives from different countries present at the site visit was to combine it with an already planned meeting of the Alliance. Because of the pandemic, the meetings of the alliances and therefore also the site visits were postponed, of course. And in the end, everything took place online. And as already mentioned, an advantage of this online format was that it created the possibility for more meetings, intermediate meetings, and also meetings to prepare with the alliance the site visit. And this was quite beneficial. Discussions were held with representatives all partners, with management, staff, students, professional field, and other relevant stakeholders. It was also possible to have mixed groups of the representatives. Template for the site visit was shared with the alliances, and they could make proposals for interviewees. Naturally, the online format meant that the template had to be adapted. This was done also in a cooperation between the panel and the alliance. The panel report should contain findings and analysis, conclusions regarding the criteria, recommendations for further improvement, and they did the report. The panels were given a template for the report so that the structure of the reports would be the same across different panels, which did not mean, of course, that the content of the report was that it was also approached in the same manner. There were actually quite some differences also in between the panel reports. The alliances had the possibility to review the draft report also on factual errors. And as this was a pilot, it was agreed with the alliances that the full report will remain confidential and that the public summary will be published after the consent of the alliance. And you can see here, if you have not seen it yet, the link where the public summaries are published. So what was said about these procedural aspects in the evaluation of the pilots, and what consequences could this have for the framework? Understandably, at the start of the European University, the available documentation is limited. The option to write an appreciative self-evaluation was used in only one case. The panel found this nevertheless very useful to have this appreciative self-evaluation, and gives the alliance also the opportunity to explain where they are in view of the criteria. So the proposal is to include this appreciative self-evaluation as a standard element in the framework for future evaluations. This seems also necessary in view of the ESC, especially when there's only scarce other documentation available regarding the criteria. I think that everyone agrees that 3 experts in the pilot is not sufficient to evaluate a complex international alliance. These 5 experts would be needed to cover all the necessary different types of expertise, including the university network expertise. The one-way training workshop was, I mentioned, positively evaluated. Nevertheless, the roles of experts and process coordinators could be made more explicit, and there could be more attention for the report writing in the training, as writing such an evaluation report for an alliance is, of course, very different than writing reports on a single institution. It was also noted that there are differences in cultures between agencies that add to complexity, and therefore, as Patrick also said, it should be considered whether in the future evaluations can be carried out by one ECO-registered agency, as is done indeed in the approach for quality assurance of joint programs. The site visit, the fact that the site visits had to be carried out online was, of course, not foreseen, although although not being on site has certainly disadvantages. It had really the advantage that there was this flexibility with online meetings. And these were also used to clarify mutual expectations. Therefore, the proposal is to include online preparatory meetings for the panel and a kick-off meeting between the alliance and the panel in the framework. 1 day for site visit seems too short to have discussion with all stakeholders and to also have sufficient time for reflection, co-creation, giving advice. So the site visit should last longer and could also take place in different stages and with a mix of on-site and online meetings. More creativity in organizing the site visit and online meetings should be encouraged. As said, writing an evaluation report for an alliance is not easy, especially not when the evaluation has to be based mostly on plans. More attention for report writing in the training would be useful. It could also be considered how a more formative approach and collegiate advice could be introduced, either as part of the evaluation procedure or separately afterwards. Nevertheless, the reports were deemed useful by the alliances, and perhaps the early stage made it particularly useful and increased also the awareness regarding internal quality assurance. Should be noted, though, that the ESG required that all reports are published, and therefore this has to be included in the framework if the intention is to make it compliant to the ESG. Some issues that were raised during the pilots or in the evaluation of the pilots need further consideration. First, the framework is now primarily focused on enhancement with an appreciative approach that has proven to be valuable and appreciated by the alliance. So this enhancement perspective should certainly be kept. On the other hand, the reality is that many national external quality procedures have explicit accountability requirements. For the acceptance of the results of evaluations with this framework by national authorities, it would be important to strike a balance between enhancement and accountability. For sure, this means that the framework has to be ESG compliant in its entirety when it comes to self-evaluation and the publication of the report. On the short term, what alliances need are pragmatic solutions. For instance, alliances that are developing joint programs and want to use the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs. As there are still legal and other obstacles in a number of countries, this is still sometimes difficult. The question is whether evaluation with this European framework could assist the acceptance of the European approach. And this is also something to consider further, I think. On the long term, there are the ambitions of the European universities and of the Commission regarding the institutionalization of the alliance and the connection of the different mission of universities in the alliances. The implications for external quality assurance are yet unknown. This European quality assurance framework tries to capture the ambitions of the call for European universities, but ambitions may change and are also dependent on the context and development of each alliance. Therefore, flexibility in the framework, and especially flexibility in the application of the framework, is needed to take into account the differences in the developmental stages of alliances and to align the internal and external quality assurance.
Mark, two minutes, please.
Yes, I'm finished. So we have reached the end of the pilot phase in EUniQ, but we are also at the start of the next project phase. The QA development roadmap will take on the issues that were just mentioned, as well as other issues and lessons learned from the pilots. It should sketch a roadmap for the further development of quality assurance for European universities. Ministries in the resonance group will analyze the pertinent legal issues for European universities from their national perspectives and relate these issues to the ESG. And of course, also the European QA framework will be finalized. These activities will happen in parallel, and the results of these different activities will be shared. Finally, I want to thank everyone who was involved in the pilots, and especially the European universities who volunteered for the pilots. We very much appreciate and welcome also a continued dialogue with European universities and other stakeholders in this process. So if you have any suggestions, comments or questions, then please send these to EUniQ@nvo.net. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. We can see clearly that we have to still work on the conceptual framework, the big picture, but then also sort out a lot of details related to the process. And there was one question related to the process and practicalities, if you like, technicalities of the process in the Q&A, and that is whether you've considered the inclusion of labor market representatives in the panel in the longer term.
Yes, I think that's certainly an important aspect. If you look at the long list of required expertise that we already have, it was really difficult to have all this expertise in a panel of just 3 members. But indeed, if we have a broader panel, then this is certainly something. I mean, the relationship with the stakeholders is, of course, essential for European universities and also with the professional field. So, yeah, this should certainly be included.
Thank you very much, Mark. We are coming to the very end of our morning. I see that still most of the participants have persisted throughout the long morning, so thank you for that. I would like to pass the floor on to a colleague and a friend, Axel Arden, the Director of Department Flanders at the NVO, for the very last words of this event. So Axel, the floor is yours. We don't hear you, Axel.
But can you see me?
I can see and I can hear you now.
Great. Hello, everyone. We started the conference with Ms. Schunen as the mother of the project. And I feel a bit like the godfather of the project. I hope all 400 of you enjoyed this conference's overview of where we are in the development of the European universities and their quality assurance. In the early morning, we heard from the European Commission about the current state of play regarding European universities. And one of Ms. Engels' slides referred to unleashing the potential of European universities. And this stuck with me throughout our meeting today. The development of a quality assurance framework for European universities should help and not hinder European universities in unleashing their potential. I think we all need to understand that this is a concern for all stakeholders. We do not want to add more complexity to an already challenging development. When we developed our ideas for the EUniQ project in 2018, we were not thinking about lasagna. We do not think European quality assurance needs a new additional layer. The original idea was to develop an alternative quality assurance framework which would be able, in the long term, to replace national quality assurance procedures for universities engaged in the European University Alliance. After the European Commission, we heard from the European University Alliances and the pilot chairs, and here we saw this tension between the supranational development of European universities and their activities on the one hand, and the fact that external quality assurance is organized nationally on the other hand. I guess we can see the impact of all our experiences with the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs here. After the introduction of the Erasmus Mundus Masters, it took more than 10 years to come to this European approach. And in those 10 years, higher education institutions and quality assurance agencies had to try and overcome a lot of challenges together. And we were not always successful in doing so. And I personally felt very frustrated about this. And even now, when we are 6 years since the adoption of the European approach by European ministers, we all know its implementation still takes a lot of effort. So what did we learn about? So what did we learn of this? Well, we learned that we need to be proactive in developing appropriate quality assurance methodologies. I think quality assurance should adapt itself to the realities of higher education. And if quality assurance is not able to accommodate innovation in higher education and its methodologies, quality assurance is actually holding higher education back. When the panel chairs discussed the pilot procedures, I was struck by how well they can explain the complexity that they had to deal with. And they also put the purpose of the quality assurance framework in perspective. On the one hand, you have the evaluation of the European University as an EU project, which is thus focused on the short term. And on the other hand, you have this more long-term perspective in which the quality assurance framework helps to quality assure the European universities and all their activities. Making the purpose of the quality assurance framework more explicit seems to be a recurring recommendation. So we have come to the end of this conference, but as you have heard, the work does not stop here. The external evaluator of the EUniQ project, Mr. Van den Bos, explained very well the lessons he learned from the pilot. He presented us with a lot of food for thought on how to further develop the methodology included in the quality assurance framework. And as you have heard from our project coordinator, Mr. Fredericks, this framework will need to be updated, taking into account the feedback we heard today. We should see this conference, therefore, as a stepping stone towards a quality assurance framework. And even when the EUniQ project finally presents a European quality assurance framework, the work will not end there. Some of the important questions raised today cannot be answered by the EUniQ project alone. And I look forward to keep engaging on these questions with all of you. I would like to thank the organizers of the conference, and in particular ENQA and the Latvian Quality Assurance Agency as our hosts. I would like to thank the European University Alliances that were courageous enough to take the leap with EUniQ. And I would like to thank the pilot chairs for their expert and very eloquent contributions. And thank you, Maria, for expertly chairing our meeting. And finally, thank you all for contributing to our discussions today. And I hope to see you all again at our final conference in September, hopefully in Brussels. Goodbye.
Bye.